So now it's time for us to get into the word, and we have Manoj with us here. And for all of you who are seeing the new person on screen, that is Manoj. As many of you already know him, and he's been a part of Zoe for the last many years. I want to share that he has been a good influence. He's been a good friend, and I remember one particular time many years ago. Actually, it was in one pastors' conference when I was still working. I think full time for GMI at that point in time. That he may not remember, but I remember he had come to me and he was praying for me, and he had shared a prophetic word, and which was about thinking big. God has big things in store, and he encouraged me to think big, and I still remember that. And so, and I praise God for that prophetic word because it really helped me, work on some things of my perspective. Even during many conversations that I have with him, I have found myself, sometimes having some different thoughts, but when I talk to him, I tend to get, the right perspective, get a godly perspective on things, and then be able to align myself to what God's will is. And so he has been one great help and influence over me. Manoj, as many of you know, was also pastoring the KK Church for many years. Quite faithfully, he's still one of the elders of Zoe, and he plays a key role, even in making sure our our finances, our accounts, our all the finance aspect is well taken care of and well nurtured, and he plays a big role in that. He is married to Rani, who is also has a counseling background, and is also a very humorous person. If you meet her, you can't go out of that meeting without laughing. And but she's very jovial, full of life, and they have two wonderful children, Rochelle and Ryan. So, and today he's going to share God's words with us. So let's just welcome Manoj even as he shares with us.
Thank you, Rahul. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. It was good to spend time in worship. After a long time, listening to live worship reminded me of the times when we would worship in a hall and listen to live music. Zoom has its advantage, but not meeting together, there's nothing to replace it. You really want to be together, interact with people. And so I'm waiting when we will be able to come together and be able to worship God together. So it was interesting to hear that you spent a year just going through one chapter of the Bible. So that was very interesting. Today I'm taking one of those chapters, and it has been a very interesting chapter for me because there were things that this chapter actually even spoke to me. So I'm hoping that I will be able to bring some light, some connections to how this can be relevant to us in our day-to-day walk. I remember, so has there been any situation in your journey where you felt somebody told you something but did something completely different? कभी हुआ है ऐसा कि किसी ने कुछ कहा और तुमने कुछ और ही कर दिया? हुआ है ना? So here I remember a particular incident when my first pastor had invited me home for some Christmas or Easter. ऐसा कुछ माहौल के लिए मेरा पहला pastor ने मुझे बुलाया था. They were staying close to Devnar, and so it was a small bungalow kind of a setup that they had rented out. But when I say small, the hall is big enough than your regular church hall. That's how big the house was. So मैं गया वहाँ पे, लेकिन पहुँच के मालूम पड़ा कि दरवाजा बंद था और वहाँ पे एक चिट्ठी रखा है. So I picked up the note and read through it quickly. They said, जल्दी 3 बजे का शो के लिए रीगल पहुंच जाओ. तो मैं पूरा पढ़ा नहीं, वहीं पे चिट्ठी छोड़ के भागा क्योंकि मैं वैसे ही लेट था. I didn't know they were planning the surprise. मैं भागा, कौन सा अभी देवनार से रीगल भागते भागते पहुंचा, लेकिन वहां पे कोई नजर ही नहीं. बाहर कोई है नहीं, so I'm lost now. What to do? I waited for 2 hours. The movie got over. I did not see them. Then I came back to Deonar. 6:30-7 बजे तक वापस देवनार आ गया. 2 घंटा धूप में पसीना सूखा और कुछ नहीं. So I reached back home to their place, and then I realized that the problem was I did not read the full note that was there, and I dropped the note and I ran. Those days, this is mid-90s. We didn't have cell phones, obviously, so there was no way I could call and find out क्या हुआ. वहां पहुंचा तो बोला चिट्ठी का, पता नहीं, I don't know. So बोला उसमें लिखा हुआ था पूरा क्या करना था. All I had to do was go to the gatekeeper, tell my name. They would guide me straight to the seat that I was supposed to sit because they had already paid the price. लेकिन मैंने पूछा नहीं, उधर वेट करता रहा. तो पूरा वहां तक ट्रैवलिंग, वापस करीब 4-5 घंटे मैंने ऐसे ऊपर नीचे भागा. क्यों? क्योंकि आई डिडंट रीड द इंस्ट्रक्शंस प्रॉपर्ली. उधर पूरा लिखा हुआ था, लेकिन जोश ज्यादा था तो पढ़ा नहीं, तो सब मालूम है. So I realized that there are times we could blunder like this, that we are told something but we are going to do something completely different. And you can imagine the 5 घंटे तक मेरे दिमाग में क्या क्या चल रहा है. तो कौन कौन सा मूवी मेरे दिमाग में चल रहा है, उसमें विलन कौन है, हीरो कौन है, किसको क्या बोलना था, वो सारा डायलॉग स्क्रिप्ट सब रेडी है. लेकिन जब पहुंच के घर पे बात हुआ तो बोला ये सब मूवी क्या फायदा बनाए. So completely lost it that way. But we can always have these kind of situations where we don't follow things as instructed. Today, we are looking at a passage from the scriptures, and just give me a second. I'm using 2 different screens for a very specific purpose. And yeah, so I'm able to see the screen and the people together. So we are looking at a story from the book of Samuel in continuation, and this is the witch of Endor. एक बहुत interesting story है. Witchcraft, ऐसा क्या है इस story में? So let's look at the background of the story before we are able to proceed further. Now, God had chosen the prophet had chosen Saul as the king. But Saul जो राजा था, उसके जिंदगी में थोड़ा सब कुछ ठीक नहीं था. So there were things that he was struggling with, and he eventually loses favor with God. And so far, until this particular chapter, whenever he had a problem, he would go to Samuel. Samuel बोलता था अच्छा ये करो, कर दिए. So he was always getting guidance from Samuel, क्या करना है. लेकिन इतने सालों में वो खुद परमेश्वर में आगे नहीं बढ़ा, वो कोई और बोलता था, कर देता था. So he was growing, but not growing in a way that he should have. He was obeying, but not obeying by listening to God directly. ये तो ऐसा हो गया कि आपको सुबह क्वाइट टाइम करना है, यूट्यूब का वीडियो देख लिया, किसी और का वीडियो सुन लिया, अच्छा गुड, किसी और का रेवलेशन सुन लिया, अच्छा गुड. मतलब खुद के लिए कुछ नहीं है. देयर इज नो डायरेक्ट ड्राइंग फ्रॉम गॉड. जब बहुत पहले परमेश्वर ने उसके पास दाऊद को भेजा, when David was with him, he could face Goliath with David. David को बोला तू जा, अच्छा तू लड़का, and he could face. Now today, if you look at this chapter 28, it begins with David being in the Philistine army, और वही आर्मी उसके खिलाफ आ रहा है. अब वो और भी टेंशन में. Now what to do? पहले डेविड था, उसने गोलियत को फेस कर लिया, अब तो उससे भी बड़ा ये डेविड मेरे सामने खड़ा हुआ. वो उसको डर था. Now David, because of the frequent oppression from Saul, went and joined the Philistines. So he was part of the Philistine group. But interestingly, until now, he did not fight the Israelites ever in battle. But he kept fighting common enemies of the Philistines and Israelites. So indirectly, he was still fighting for the Israelites, even though he was with the Philistines. वो जाके इजराइल एंड फिलिस्तीन के कॉमन दुश्मनों को मारते गया, उसको हराते गया. लेकिन आज ऐसा सीन आया कि Samuel chapter 28 begins with the king saying, "You stand with me, be my bodyguard, and fight this battle." अब डेविड भी सोच रहा है ये क्या करूं अभी, मैं दोनों अभी फंस गया, अभी तो लड़ना ही पड़ेगा. He didn't want to fight. It's almost like he going and staying in Pakistan and had to fight against India, and assuming that David was Indian. So you almost imagining अब ये कैसे handle करो. But miraculously something else happens and he doesn't have to fight. Now David उठता है सुबह और देखता है करूं क्या, ये entire. So they've gathered in this valley of how do you pronounce it? Shunem. So they gathered Philistine in the large valley of Shunem, and Israel is watching this army. And now Saul is very nervous. क्या करने का पता नहीं. Now he's wondering what to do, and by now he has got rid of all occult practices in Israel. सब खत्म कर दिया. सैमुअल ने बोला नहीं चलेगा, नहीं चलेगा, उसने कर दिया. लेकिन अभी this story, Samuel is also dead. So now what to do? Samuel is dead, and who to ask? And God is not speaking to him. So अब पता नहीं क्या करने का. So suddenly he goes to the extreme and he says, अभी कैसे तो I need to hear God. And he asks for if there are any persons who can consult the spirits. तो कोई कहता है हाँ यहाँ पर है, इंडोर में एक जगह है. So he has to go detour, go across roundabout to this place and go and see this witch at Endor. So he disguises himself, takes some people, and he goes to Endor. It is assumed that he goes by night and comes back. So he's done an overnight double shift. So दिन में he's watching this army. At night he goes, comes back, and the next day he's into battle. So really exhausted in battle. It was a difficult time for him. It's almost like you can imagine तुम्हारा HSC एग्जाम से रात को पढ़ाई किया, सुबह उठ के एग्जाम दिया, फिर आके पढ़ाई किया, सुबह एग्जाम दिया. So it was a very difficult exam for Saul. So he goes at night to this place called Endor, and he meets this witch and says, I want you to bring up somebody from the dead. So the witch says, I can't do this because Saul is not allowed that to happen. So he says, don't worry, you bring up somebody. And so he says, bring up to me Samuel. And so this witch does witchcraft and calling up the spirits medium. And it says she calls up a familiar spirit. So there are experts who believe that this may not be Samuel. There are experts who believe it is Samuel. There are conflicting things being spoken. My personal belief is that it was a familiar spirit, somebody who was imitating Samuel and was bringing a picture as though that was Samuel. Now, somehow this lady comes to recognize Saul when she sees the spirit. I don't know how, but something there she recognized, even though Saul was disguised, saying, "You are Saul." So अब वो डर गई, अभी मेरे को मार डालेगा क्योंकि ये करना यहाँ पे मना था. वो डर गई. Now what to do? So Saul then asked, "How is this person looking like?" So she describes that spirit, and so he says, "This is Samuel." And there is a discussion between Samuel and this so-called Samuel and Saul. And after that discussion, he is so fearful because the spirit tells him that he will die in battle. So my personal belief is this was not really Samuel, but a demonic spirit that was in operations. And Saul then comes back, and next day he goes into battle, knowing what his fate will be. He doesn't get killed, but he actually kills himself. So not the way that spirit had told it will happen. It's an interesting story that takes place, but there is something interesting that we've got to understand from this story. So we start to wonder, ये witchcraft, ये सब ये कहाँ से आया? मतलब I'm not into witchcraft. So what does this story have anything for me? But before we get to that, let's understand what witchcraft actually, the purpose of witchcraft and what it is. There are three common expressions of witchcraft. The first is What there are three phrases used interchangeably. One is called witchcraft, the other is called divination, and the third sorcery. These words are used interchangeably, but just for technical reasons to help understand, there are three different things. Witchcraft has to do with the power arm of occult. That involves calling up spirits, calling up demons, casting spells, curses, those kind of things. मुझे याद है कॉलेज के दिनों में जब मैं बिलीवर नहीं था उस वक्त there was one particular group that I was sitting with, और एक दिन शाम को बोला अच्छा चलो we'll use the Oja board, and we tried light off करके played around with stuff. I didn't realize how dangerous it can be. The Bible calls it something that is completely detestable, and there's just that one incident that I actually was a part of it. So these are kind of demon invoking spirits. They will appear to be very gentle, nice. The world today has new age religions in terms of things like even Satanist. So there's a religion, Satanist, and they if you talk to them, they'll say the Satan we worship is not the Satan from the Bible. It's a different person. So we don't believe in those spirits. So the demon world has created things that appear to be very simple, nice, safe. It's not harmful. You have heard of black magic. There is white magic also. If you go to some of the temples in Mumbai, you might see books being sold of black magic, white magic, different kind of rituals that are there. They are packaged in a very gentle or nice way. But people who have left those kind of practices and come out have confessed to the background things that take place and how dangerous dabbling with any of these are. The second that you see is divination. This is more of the knowledge arm of occult. This is where people try to acquire knowledge. There are tarot cards. There is Reiki. There are different types of these that tell you the future. So palm reading, horoscope, yeah, that's what you should call it. You have these kind of variants of acquiring knowledge, accessing these kind of practices by using these kind of practices. That's the knowledge arm of the occult. And then you have the third one, which is called divination. And that has to do with the objects that people pick up. So you have these kind of people who will take, ताबीज ऐसा कुछ चीजें जो लेकर आते हैं. कभी-कभी छुट्टियों में जाते हैं लोग, वहां से खरीद लेते हैं. And you never know, sometimes these can be objects dedicated to the occult. These are charms. Certain countries, you go to witch doctors and they will give you love potions, or they will give you certain things that you should keep with you. People have superstitions. ये मेरे पास रहेगा, ये मेरे लिए lucky है. मैं एग्जाम के लिए यही पेन से लिखूंगा. These kind of superstitious beliefs that kind of connects to the occult world. That's called sorcery. Now, in the Bible, you will have all three of these that is mentioned. So you will have witchcraft, divination, and sorcery. They're used interchangeably, and these three exist. Now, the purpose or the primary objective of the occult activities is to do with either to manipulate, intimidate, and eventually dominate. That's the purpose or the objective of the occult activities. It needs to control. The need for control is extremely high in occult. So people who dabble with it get so sucked in that they then are forced to continue that practice of control through either manipulation, intimidation, or domination. That's what it's trying to accomplish. So I might not have gotten to any of these. Today, if you go to some of these places, you will find ये काफी साधारण तरीके से किया जाता है. लोगों को लगता भी नहीं ये occult है. कई जगहों पे लोग जाते हैं प्रार्थना करने के लिए. वहां पे होता है एक्चुअली occult, लेकिन उसे लगता है ये अच्छे के लिए हो रहा है, थोड़ी देर के लिए अच्छा लगता है, फिर बाद में और बुरा होने लगता है. These occult practices involves demons. Now, demons are persons without bodies. That's what a demon is, person without bodies, and they primarily try and accomplish these things in terms of manipulation, intimidation, and domination. That's what demon will do. So I might not actually get involved in any form of occult, but there are things that can inherently be there in me because of my fallen nature with a desire to control things. And I might express it in my character through manipulation, intimidation, and domination. So when I look at when I look in people and their behaviors, they are expressed in different ways. So I have seen, or I have known, that demons can either tempt, harass, torment, compel, enslave, defile, deceive, bring sicknesses. These are things that demons will do to try and dominate people. And they will influence people with certain character weaknesses, and they will exhibit a dominating behavior in different ways. So they are not really into witchcraft or allow demonic control, but they have certain character weaknesses that allow a behavior to dominate people. For example, men will generally try and intimidate. So husbands are likely at home to try and shout, yell, express strong anger. That's more of a masculine approach of exhibiting desire for control. लॉकडाउन में हमने बहुत समय फैमिली के साथ बिता दिया ऐसा लगता है, लेकिन इसमें कई बार हम फैमिली में इतना झगड़ा हो रहा है, कई बार हम उल्टा सीधा कह देते हैं. And husbands are likely to exhibit a dominating behavior by being very aggressive in their approach. Wives, on contrast, will use a softer approach of manipulation. They will cry, they will complain, they will nag, but that's another form of trying to get control. So children, by and large, cannot dominate or intimidate, but they will end up manipulation in different forms. They will disobey, they will do things intentionally. I remember मैं जब छोटा था और मुझे खेलने जाना था, तो मैं शुरू हो जाता था, पिताजी 5-5:30 बजे घर आ जाएंगे, तो उसके पहले मुझे घर से बाहर निकलना है, नहीं तो फिर तो गया. तो 4 बजे अपना राग शुरू हो जाएगा मम्मी के सामने. मम्मी मैं जाऊं 4 बजे से शुरू, तो वो राग चलता रहेगा. 15 मिनट के बाद मैं बोल रहा हूँ जा रहा हूँ, भाग गया. अब शाम को आ जाएगा घर पे, मालूम है दूसरा स्टोरी चलेगा, वहां पे एक अलग ड्रामा चलेगा. तो पिताजी पूछेगा किससे पूछ के गया, मेरा हाथ मम्मी की तरफ, मम्मी ने बोला हाँ. अब उनके बीच में झगड़ा, मैं बच गया वहां पे. सो चिल्ड्रन know how to manipulate things to get things going. They will get their way by throwing off tantrums, throwing up things, they'll end up trying to manipulate the situation because they want control in their own manner. You can be in the office and you will suddenly realize there are conversations that's happening. You will end up wanting to put somebody down because you're not able to stand up to that person. You're basically trying to control relationships. You will end up speaking ill about other people. You're trying to get control of relationships by trying to project a different image or picture about someone else so that this relationship stands better. So we all have that fallen nature and we end up having these character flaws. And with Saul, much earlier, he had these character flaws, but he was not willing to address it. And so eventually reached a point where he opened his door to allow demonic control in his life. And that's that passage in 1 chapter, Samuel 1:28 that we see. So there are demon spirits that try and influence people, try and drag them in a different direction. So let's see what was happening to King Saul. Now, before this chapter, there was one message from God that he did not really take seriously. कई बार हमको prophetic words आ जाते हैं, हमको परमेश्वर से एक मैसेज आता है जो हम ध्यान नहीं देते, छूट जाता है। जैसे मेरे किस्से में मैंने कहा मुझे चिट्ठी दिया था, ये करना था, मैंने ध्यान नहीं दिया और वो मिस आउट हो गया। यहाँ पे सॉल के लिए बहुत बड़ा चीज मिस आउट हुआ, और वो 1 सैमुएल 15 में एक कहानी है, और ये कहानी बहुत बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है समझने की। उसका कहानी क्या था? एमेलेकाइट्स करके एक ग्रुप है, and now this is the descendants of Esau. They came out of Esau, and their animosity with Jacob and their descendants continued. मतलब Amalekites और Israelites के बीच में हमेशा झगड़ा पहले से था. So when God brought Israelites out of Egypt and they crossed the Red Sea, एक जगह पे ये Amalekites आके उनसे युद्ध कर लेता है। तो ये कहानी हमें पता है, ये वो कहानी है जहाँ पे मूसा पहाड़ के ऊपर खड़ा देके हाथ ऊपर करके प्रार्थना कर रहा है। So it's that background story that was there when they were attacked, and Moses tells Joshua, "You take your best men, go out to fight. We will have to defend." So Moses is standing up with his hands and praying, and Joshua is fighting downstairs, and they win the battle eventually. But God makes a promise at that point. परमेश्वर कहता है कि अमलेकाइट्स मैं पूरा खत्म कर दूंगा और मैं छोड़ूंगा नहीं। और ये जजमेंट पास होता है और सॉल को चुना जाता है ये काम पूरा करने के लिए। सो later on it comes to Saul and he was instructed to go and finish off the Amalekites completely. मतलब कुछ भी नहीं छोड़ना है, क्योंकि जो मूसा को वचन दिया था वो पूरा करने का वक्त था। Now Saul decides to go, और हालांकि उसको एकदम साफ कहा गया कि पूरा खत्म करना है, he does not listen and he brings back things. कई बार हमसे कुछ अपना मैनेजर कुछ कहता है और फिर हम उसको घुमा चढ़ा के कुछ और बताते, नहीं मेरा ये करने का मतलब था, ये ऐसा ऐसा करना था, and we try and give an explanation to the entire thing. And Saul did the same thing with Samuel. So no, मेरे को तो ये सारा चीज परमेश्वर को भेंट चढ़ाने के लिए लेकर आया, and he turned the whole thing around to say as though he was being very religious and pious. And at that point, Samuel makes a very dreadful statement because there were character flaws that were identified with Saul, and he did not take that seriously in his son. So, what does God say in the Bible connected to witchcraft and idolatry? Now, I've got a few verses, and I need people to just quickly read out a few verses. So can somebody read Deuteronomy 18 verses 10 to 14? Somebody else in the meantime can get ready with the next verse.
Sorry, Deuteronomy 18?
Verses 10 to 14.
Should I start?
Let no one be found among you who sacrifice his son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engage in witchcraft or cast spells, or who is a medium or spirits, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does this thing is detestable to the Lord, and because of this detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. You must be blameless before the Lord your God.
ये काफी इंटरेस्टिंग वर्स है, क्योंकि उस जमाने में लोग बच्चों को सैक्रिफाइस कर देते थे, you know. So one interesting variant, today we don't sacrifice our children, but we can get so busy with work from home that we have no time for them. We sacrifice their childhood, and that's a little scary, that we don't actually sacrifice, but we have no time to spend with the kids, to talk to them and understand what they're going through. So that's a little scary, not really from this portion, but something for us to watch out for. Yeah, someone can read Leviticus 20 verses 6 and verses 27.
I will set
I
my...
will,
Okay,
I
go
will,
ahead.
I will set my face against the person who turns to mediums and spiritists to prostitute himself by following them, and I will cut him off from his people.
That's another very scary judgment. So this desire for control in the occult can lose our connection with God completely. Before we come to 1 Chronicles 10, can someone read Isaiah 8:19? Isaiah 8:19.
When someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living?
That's so the dead cannot really give any advice to the living. That's also the background to understand why occult will be completely fake, and we should not get involved in anything remotely connected to occult. Can someone read Revelations 21 verse 8?
But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, and the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death.
This is scary again. This is Revelation, right? The last book of the Bible. So through the whole Bible, whether it was Old or New Testament, you very clearly see God saying, do not get involved in any of these. Now let's read why Saul died in 1 Chronicles 10:13. Can someone read that? 1 Chronicles 10:13.
Saul died because he was unfaithful to the Lord. He did not keep the word of the Lord and even consulted a medium for the guidance.
So very clearly, we see that Saul had died in battle. He actually killed himself. But that's not why he died. He died much earlier because he became unfaithful to God. And he did not respect prophetic words given to him. Now that's an early signal that is given to us. So let's look at what happened there in 1 Samuel 15. There was this particular situation where he comes back with these things that he was told to destroy, and Samuel meets him and makes this famous statement: rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft and stubbornness like the sin of idolatry. उससे ये कहा जाता है कि तुम्हें ये दो कमियां हैं जो बहुत डेंजरस है, आपको ये होना नहीं चाहिए आपके पास. And we will suddenly start seeing that rebellion and witchcraft now gets connected. What is rebellion? Rebellion rejects God's authority and accepts an illegal authority doing his or own thing. मुझे अपने तरीके से जिंदगी जीना है, मुझे जो करना है वही करना है. Basically trying to keep control of things on my own life. I don't want somebody else to say or do anything. I will choose to do things myself. And this is similar to what we saw about witchcraft, wanting to do their own thing, control things, be in charge of things. And rebellion rejects God's authority completely. And that's where he was being questioned by Samuel. Stubbornness makes his or own opinion as is God, making it difficult to receive inputs or advice from others. So it looks like when Samuel was confronting Saul, these were character flaws that was inherently in him that he was not willing to deal with. So he wasn't directly dabbling with witchcraft, but he had sin which is the same level as witchcraft and idolatry. If you were to walk in the office or in church and you were told that this person is a Satanist and he invokes spirits, or you watch somebody worship idols, you will feel very critical about that person. You will have questions. Ye kya kar raha hai? Ye galat hai. लेकिन अगर मैं किसी को ये दो चीजों के साथ देखूं, मुझे उसका कोई असर नहीं. So if I see somebody who's a rebel and doesn't respect authority that God has appointed, I will अरे ये तो एकदम हीरो है, एंटी हीरो जैसा जो मूवी में दिखा रहा है, बहुत गट्स है, ये तो अपना मैनेजर को ऐसा सब कह दिया, अरे सही है. I will acknowledge and even appreciate that person. If I see somebody who is stubborn, I will not worry. ठीक है, थोड़ा जिद्दी है, उसमें क्या है, होता है सब लोग थोड़ा जिद्दी. But Scripture is putting these two on par with each other, rebellion and stubbornness. So we've got to be careful of what God speaks in His Word and give it the same level of seriousness. Saul did not, and that eventually character weaknesses was something that the enemy, the demon world, was able to exploit, and he was able to manipulate Saul. So if you look, even after this word, you will see things that now at this point, when Samuel said these things to Saul, David was not chosen as the next king. You know, ये एक अजीब सा स्टोरी है, इसलिए क्योंकि दुनिया में अगर मैं किसी को पूछूं पहला आदमी कौन है जिसने ये काम किया, मून में पहला आदमी कौन सा सब जानते हैं, तो सेकंड कौन सा पता नहीं कौन है, हमको पता भी नहीं है. लेकिन ये कहानी में, इतिहास में, सॉल को कोई नहीं याद रखना चाहता है, दाऊद को याद रखना. सेकंड किंग वाज समवन एवरीबॉडी वांट्स टू रिमेंबर. सॉल से कहा गया कि ये चीजों पे ध्यान रखो, तुम्हें ये वीकनेस है, उसने ध्यान नहीं दिया, और उसके आगे की जिंदगी में ये हमेशा दिखता है कि ये रिबेलियन स्टबर्ननेस बाहर आ रहा है. he tries to kill David so many times. उसे मारना चाहता है, जबकि उसको पता है, वचन में कहा गया है कि तुम किसी को नहीं मार सकते. हालांकि उसे पढ़ा है, वो जानता है, सैमुएल ने उसे कहा भी होगा, लेकिन फिर भी कहता है. वो अपने लड़के को भी मारने को देखा जब उसने देखा कि जोनाथन दाऊद का पक्ष ले रहा है. सो this aspect, the character weakness was repeated multiple times. You know, you may have certain anger issues, or you may have certain addictions, and you end up repeating that behavior again and again and again. It becomes such a strong area of your life that you end up allowing demonic influence after a certain period of time. So Saul was warned about this behavior way back, but he chooses to ignore. He continues that behavior, and eventually it allows the enemy or demon world to start influencing him. The scriptures, interestingly, in Galatians 5 mentions that those who belong to Jesus Christ have crucified the flesh with its passion. So this character flaw is there in us, in the flesh. So it's interesting, if you read the book of Galatians chapter 5, it mentions verse 28, idolatry and witchcraft as one of the things of the flesh. So this desire to control and manipulate things is something inherently there, but if I don't watch over it, it allows the demon world to take possession of that area of my life and allow that to grow drastically. So I've got to be careful of my areas of weakness that I see God is highlighting. The answer to this is the power of the gospel. So I might have certain struggles. So maybe it is my anger issues. Maybe it's relational issues. I have this tendency to manipulate or control things, to dominate people, to manipulate, or maybe it's connected to certain behavior patterns that I have beyond these, that I know is causing relational damage at home, in church, and at workplace. Maybe it is certain addictions that I have. I end up spending time reading material that I should not be spending time on, watching things that I should not be watching. Maybe it's music. It kind of gives me a soothing effect, especially rock music, which is connected to demonic world. So the kind of music we listen to, we need to be careful. There are certain things that we repeatedly do in behaviors that we have to watch out. All the answers for this is found in the gospel. The gospel has the power, but there are certain things I realize we must be careful. In the book of Galatians, can somebody read the first 3 verses of Galatians chapter 3?
In foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ is clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to know just one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law, or by believing what you heard? Are you still today? After beginning by means of the Spirit, and now trying to finish by means of the flesh?
We lost your voice. I don't know if I lost it or
No, it's not clear.
it's not clear. So can we just read that? Rahul, your signal was broken.
Okay.
You foolish, Rahul, you're reading again?
Go ahead, Rahul.
Go ahead, Rahul.
Okay. So I think we need to hear the foolish part of it.
No, still not clear, Rahul. Still.
Rahul, you might need to change your mic.
Okay.
I'll read. You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to learn just one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by believing what you heard? Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of the flesh?
This was interesting. There was an evil spirit that was blinding the church of the gospel of Christ. And what were the people doing? They were trying to receive the Spirit through works. कुछ करके परमेश्वर से कुछ पाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, but gospel वो नहीं है. So if I end up having legalistic approaches to life, especially to the scriptures, I can get blinded of the gospel. And that is a little dangerous. Now, why did I bring this up? One, because I realized, even as I was preparing, there was one aspect of the gospel that I realized in this preparation. Now, first thing is, what is the gospel? Now, gospel is not something that you can do. It's literally meaning good news. Something that has happened in the past, it has happened. It is not something that I can do now that I will get something. It is good news. News is always past and it has happened. So one of the things I came across when I was preparing this was this aspect when I would approach God in my failure and say, God, give me a second chance. Now, please understand what I'm saying next. Gospel is not about second chance to correct what you did. Gospel is exchange of your performance record with Christ. Now, yes, I need another chance having blundered, but my approach to God was, let me try this again. मैं फिर से एक अच्छा काम करने को देखता हूँ. I will do certain behaviors, I will do certain things correctly. But if that's my approach, then it's through works that I'm trying to receive God's favor. That's not what the scripture is. The gospel is something that has happened, and I stand before the cross and I say, God, this is my set of failures. I have blundered horribly. I need forgiveness, and I'm placing my performance record for you before you. Give me your performance record. So now that I have Christ's performance record, I live to honor him. It is not that I try to repeat a better behavior so that I will get God's favor. It is because I have received God's performance record, Christ's performance record. Now I want to live to honor him. I've already received it. Now, if I don't understand this, when I approach God for prayer, I'm going to keep thinking, okay, अरे मैंने ऐसा किसी से कह दिया, मैनिपुलेट किया, कंट्रोल किया, अब मैं दोबारा माफी मांगता हूँ, दोबारा कोशिश करता हूँ. That's not what gospel is. Gospel is when you say, my performance records are wiped away and I get a clean slate. Now that I've got a clean slate, let me express my love and devotion to God by obeying what he says. So when I approach God, knowing that there is this desire to control, manipulate, dominate people, do things, I know I have failed. I need to get that corrected. And the gospel has the power to release me from that feelings. If I don't deal with it, in my journey, I will open doors to the demonic. So if I have any aspect of reading up horoscope, reading up palmistry, tarot cards, there are all these open age. A lot of big people are involved. So even people like Oprah Winfrey is a new age believer. She says she's a Christian, but her beliefs do not match the Bible. It's a different gospel that she's talking about. So a lot of celebrities are involved in it. So I could be influenced by any of them. I may have brought things which may be charms, which may be superstitious beliefs. And those beliefs might be damaging. May have brought in objects, and that may be damaging my understanding of what the scripture says. I may have stopped hearing God completely for a long season, not able to hear what God is saying because I may have allowed a spirit to blind what the gospel is saying. And those are things that I need to deal with. Then we will get to a time of prayer. So what are things that we need to recognize here? That there are character flaws that we should not ignore, especially when I do my quiet times. If I'm doing quiet time by listening to a video or somebody else's devotion, but not drawing directly from God, then I may end up with a journey like Saul, who did not grow up by his relationship with God. He depended on Samuel to tell him what God is telling him to do. If you've dabbled in new age activities like Ouija boards, horoscope, palm reading, rock music, drugs, addictions, there's certain specific behavior that you see repeatedly happening, then it needs to be repented for immediately. Recognize your desire for control through manipulation, intimidation, or domination. Then it is time to let it go and trust God for being in control of things rather than you trying to manipulate and hold things together. Ask God for an exchange of his performance records and not for a second chance. Yes, I need a second chance, but not to perform things to get his favor, but so that I can honor him. I can express my love and devotion to her. And then serve him with that performance records as your standards. While we close, I'm going to ask Rahul to probably create some breakout rooms. And if you sense the need for being prayed for, then can I please plead with you to have that completed, to go back, get prayed for now before you leave the service, so that you don't have those kind of struggles. Don't let the enemy manipulate your emotions and your struggles of your journey with God. So back to you, Rahul.